1990 was a year of revivals. We had revivals in Tic-Tac-Toe, The Joker's Wild, Supermarket Sweep, Family Feud, To Tell the Truth, Let's Make a Deal, and our subject for today. As was said in the 70s and the 80s, we're saying it again in the 90s. Get ready to match the stars with Match Game.
Get ready to match the stars as we play the all-new star-studded Match Game. And here's the star of Match Game, Ross Shafer.
Hi there. Welcome to the Match Game.
Match Game's third revival made it to air on July 16th, 1990. Hosted by comedian and local Seattle boy Ross Shafer, contestants played the classic game with a brand new twist that made the game much more interesting. That new twist, matchup, added more game to the show and also added more money to the game. While everything was new, especially with Brad Garrett, Bill Kirkenbauer, and others acting as semi-regulars, you also saw the returns of some of the old guard as Charles Nelson Riley was brought back as a regular to bridge the gap between the old and the new. And also other veterans of the 70s show would be brought back in Vicki Lawrence, Edie McClurg, and even Charles' old sparring partner, Brett Summers, made frequent returns. Who was also supposed to come back for this show was a panelist turned host in Bert Convy. When ABC bought the show in 1989, Bert Convy taped 5 pilots of the show. And if you saw the pilots, it was pretty much not a revival of Match Game per se as the syndicated version, but more like a revival of Match Game PM.
As we play the all-new star-studded Match Game. And here's the star of Match Game, Bert Convy.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome to Match Game.
The pilots deserve mention here too because of what the show looked like before the summer 1990 launch. In the pilots, the format was something akin to what we'd see in the 1998 version of Match Game, melded with Match Game PM's front game. The front game has the 2 contestants playing 3 rounds of the classic 70s Match Game. Instead of trying to fill out the readout of all 6 stars, they played for points, where the first 2 rounds were worth 1 point per match, and the third round being 2 points per match. Whoever had the most points after 3 rounds wins and plays the super match for $10,000. The super match is played exactly like the super match from the daytime version from 1978 onwards. First part being the audience match where the top answer is worth $500, second $250, and third $100. Afterwards, they'd spin the gigantic star wheel to see who'd play for 10 times the amount. If it landed on a red dot in this version, it got doubled. They had the 2 match on one final question, they won the money. I'll have to admit, this is a superior format, but after watching the pilot, I could see why they switched it up. In the third pilot, which was broadcast on GSN a few years back, it ran around 27 minutes, which is too long for a show, and a lot of stuff would have to have been edited out in order to make air. The fifth pilot, which is on Wink Martindale's YouTube channel, shows a much cleaner cut of the show at around 22 minutes. Now, Bert Convy was slated to host the show since the beginning, but a fateful day in April of 1990 changed all that. While visiting his mom in the hospital, he pretty much collapsed. And after collapsing, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. That tumor caused him to pull out of the Match Game gig, and a new host had to be found quickly. That host turned out to be none other than Almost Live's own Ross Shafer.
The star of Match Game, Ross Shafer.
I want to welcome all of you to Match Game. Glad you could join us.
Before doing Match Game, Ross Shafer hosts the show Love Me, Love Me Not, Fox's Late Show, and Seattle's own Almost Live, which he also produced and helped garner a ton of Emmys for. Ross brought that style of hosting from Almost Live and The Late Show, and did really well with it on Match Game. Sure, he was no Gene Rayburn, but he never tried to be. Sure, he did some of the voices, but his main gift was letting the stars and contestants shine a bit. The first couple of weeks with Ross were basically a trial by fire, but once we got into August of 1990, he was on form, especially with good rapport with the celebs and the contestants. Now, the format of the game is a mix of classic Match Game and a brand new wrinkle into the mix. The first round is your basic match game where the contestant has to match as many of the stars as they can. For each match they get, they earn $50. After each contestant gets a question, we enter a new round called Matchup. Now, Matchup is a series of audience match, super match style questions between a contestant and a celebrity of their choosing. In this round, the contestant picks one of two possible answers via a secret screen. Ross then reads the options. If the celebrity gets it right, the contestant earns $50. The contestant has 30 seconds to get as many of these matches as they can. I actually like the speed round aspect. It's faster and it's a good counterbalance to the normal format. Not only that, it does give someone who didn't do well in the normal match game parts a way to catch up. And with it being over the same amount as match in the first round, it's all good. After that, we have one more round of regular match game, then we get the final matchup. Final matchup plays just like matchup, but instead of 30 seconds, you get 45 seconds, and each match is worth $100. The person with the most cash afterwards wins it all, and plays super match for $10,000. I'm fine with final matchup being longer and worth more since you had 3 rounds with matches being $50 a pop, so it doesn't make the previous 3 rounds useless. Plus, it adds some nice drama to the game where you have someone needing 7 or more to win the game and manage to pull it off with 2 seconds to spare. And Super Match plays just like every other version of the game with a star wheel. This version, however, did start out with the traditional $500, $250, $100 spread, but after a couple months into the run, it changed it to $500, $300, $200. Afterwards, the star wheel and head-to-head match played as described in the pilot. Overall, the show was really good and I enjoyed it a lot. The set looked great, especially when it got upgraded around the same time the super match amounts got changed. And I enjoyed Shafer as a host and how he played off the contestants and the celebs. Some of the banter was quite good, except for one notable instance. And I think I better talk about that a later time. While the revival was great, it unfortunately was short-lived. Because ABC aired it in the noon time slot, a lot of major markets, especially on the East Coast, didn't air because that's when they air local news. So they either put it on later time slots, sometimes post-midnight, or they dumped it onto independent stations or cities never carried it at all. And because of that, the show would be axed after 250 episodes around July of 1991. Now, during the finale, there's a little moment that Ross Shafer pretty much hinted that the show would be moving to CBS, but that move never materialized. I'm under the assumption that Mark Goodson would have given up Family Feud in 1991 to have Match Game back on, but we'll never know. We'll just never know. So that's going to do it for this edition of The Games of 90, and next time I think we're going to stick with Mark Goodson and his other game show revival of 1990, To Tell the Truth. Until next time, bye-bye!